Hola, I'm Mike Pence, the Vice President of the United States. Nicolas Maduro is a dictator.
The people of Venezuela have had enough.
The quest for freedom is on.
Of oppression, corruption, and economic hardship.
One of the largest oil reserves in the world.
Trump foreign policy we see in Venezuela.
Keep the oil. Maybe you'll have another chance.
This is the What and the Why podcast for the week ending the 1st of February 2019.
Okay, everybody, that's a wrap.
Hola, viva el revolucion bolivaro, no pasarán, and I'd like 2 papadoms and a pint of lager and some mushy peas with that, please. Welcome to the smorgasbord that is the What and the Why podcast with me, anti-commie chef Tim Marshall, and a boy named sous chef...
David Waywell.
David Waywell. Hi. At which point...
Mientras quieren miliciano, los moros no pasarán, no pasarán, no pasarán.
No pasarán. Venezuela, as South America again becomes a playground for outside powers. Well, the hard left in the English-speaking world repeats, no pasarán, they shall not pass, again and again and again. I think because it sounds really cool, and if you say it often enough in, say, tooting, then the Bolivarian revolution in Venezuela must succeed. Surely.
Power to the people!
And a revolution in the realm of biryani, as Marks and Spencer introduce a biryani wrap, which according to at least 6 people on Twitter is cultural appropriation akin to racism. Plus a news wrap, in which I've appropriated stories from all over the place, a spam email, or is it? Cooker of linguistics, David Waywell can decide, last week's podcast this week, and facts. Starting with... David Waywell's week.
Oh, my week. Well, I've got a cold. I'm ill. I'm sick.
Sorry, that's not funny.
That's what I'm bringing to the podcast this week. Flu.
Can germs come through microphones?
Yeah, they can. I can confirm that.
Oh, right. Well, I'm sorry about that. I hope you get better soon.
Yeah. Yeah.
This podcast not brought to you by Strepsils.
No. Oh, Strepsils, my salvation this week. Yeah. It's been awful, this cold. Anyway, I'll fight on through.
God, no pasarán. You are one brave hombre, David.
I'm a Bolivian hero.
Let's come to that Simon Bolivar in a moment.
Yeah, Bolivarian hero.
So, Venezuela's slow death spiral continues, but who's to blame? I mean, again, the podcast doesn't try to just do the news, because that's done everywhere. It's more of the sort of why, what's going on behind it. Inflation's running at 80,000%, although it probably just went up a few percentage during that sentence. There's shortages of food and medicine, massive unemployment, rampant corruption, riots, millions of people have fled the country over the past 2 or 3 years. It does look like there will be an implosion or a revolution or a coup. Something's going to happen this year. The opposition leader, Juan Guaido, has declared himself interim president. He says that Nicolas Maduro has forfeited the right to be president because he rigged last year's elections. The US, Brazil, most of Latin American countries now recognise Guaido as the legitimate president. So it's coming to a head. But the hard left sees all this as mostly due to the Americans and American sanctions. Well, I think that ignores that sanctions only began in 2015, that anyway they're targeted at regime members. It ignores that until last week the USA bought Venezuelan oil, and also that it's the military which actually controls most of the oil industry, and the generals are multi-millionaires. So if that's correct, and of course there's an argument against it, that no, it's the Yankee oppressor yet again interfering in Latin American politics. But, David, why do you think there's such a reluctance to apportion or at least share the blame around, or simply to say, look, the Maduro regime has got it wrong?
I was reading an article this morning. They were talking about the fact that it's not really the Maduro regime which has got it wrong. It's really all going back to Chavez, isn't it? The problem really was set back with, like, I mean, he was like, I don't know if he was always as crazy as he was at the point when he died, but he was unique, shall we say?
Yes, he was. But I mean, for all his legion of faults, some of which I'm going to list, there was a large redistribution of wealth. There were many projects that did get to the poorest, especially in education. There were a lot of very positive things, but it was after he died that the real repression, the real corruption, and the enrichment by the military class, which is the same as the government class these days, then it really took off. But you're right. Again, to try and frame this, Chavez paid for everything through the oil. It's got more oil reserves, proven oil reserves, than any other country in the world, including Saudi Arabia. And he did distribute a lot of this wealth, including to himself and his family and extended family, but also to many of the people. And he was, without a doubt, popular. Not with the previous capitalist ruling class, no, but he was popular. But he bet the farm on oil. And there was nothing else going on in the country, really, to sustain it once the oil price collapses. And even before that happened, he'd gone for these alternative forms of organisation, as he called it. They were cooperative, self-managed factories, because everything was nationalised and then given to the people. And almost every single one of them completely failed. They were corrupt, they were inefficient, they didn't work. And so this happened under his rule. Then he dies in 2013, and boom, the oil price drops in 2014. Maduro hasn't got the charisma. Maduro is nowhere near as strong with the generals, and under his, 6 years nearly of rule, rampant corruption. But the key for me is that the authoritarian rule accelerates. So, again, that's to frame it.
Yeah, I was going to say it's really become a symbol of, like, the failure of socialism again. That's what it's being held up as, especially in America, where Venezuela has always been, like, part of the political debate. I mean, if you remember many years ago when Republicans were anti-Russian and anti-social, when Republicans were anti-socialism, they wanted intervention all the time. I mean, even Obama considered it, didn't he?
Yes, and he put in the first sanctions. It wasn't Trump.
Yeah.
It was Obama that put them in 2015. But they were targeted against regime figures. You know, this was not, you can't have these medicines and we're not going to allow food imports. And they carried on buying most of Venezuela's oil. And also, since 2015, the Chinese have come in with billions and billions of dollars of reasonably cheap loans because they're trying to get a foothold in there. So this is partially a failure of this experiment in socialism, but I don't think it is. I think it's wrong to brand it as that. For me, yes, the policies may have been unsuccessful, but it's the people that implemented them. And I don't buy this argument that communism would almost certainly work if it's never been tried properly. I don't buy that argument. But on this example of socialist policies, if you have a very good ruling class with the oil money to sustain it, and you don't go in for this typical Latin American banana republic corruption that the Maduro class has gone for, things would be a lot better. So the framing of, it's socialism to blame, no, it's capitalism to blame, is not where I'm coming from. I'm coming from these are the people that have failed Venezuela.
There was a time, wasn't there, under Chavez, when it was actually seen as a success, wasn't it? It was held up as a sort of...
Well, it was by the left, yeah. I mean, there was this thing called the pink tide. And the pink tide came in beginning in the early 2000s, and many of the countries in that part of the world had shifted to the left, of varying degrees. Bolivia, fairly hard. Certainly under Chavez, Venezuela, Brazil to a lesser extent. And it was called a pink tide, but the pink tide's gone out, and there's actually now a blue tide, if you like, led by Bolsonaro in Brazil. And most of the South American countries now are centrist or right of centre, with just a few of them left as left of centre. So yeah, and Venezuela was held up as a success by the left, because it did fit a narrative. What they overlook, and so often overlook, was the tyranny of the Chavez regime, its oppression of many, many people, its jailing of people. Under Maduro, it's taken a very unpleasant anti-Semitic tinge as well. And these things are all overlooked because people come to it from an ideological point of view, and that, you know, when people are ideological, they're prepared to overlook all sorts of things. For example, the Castro's regime's treatment of gay people for decades.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've seen it in this country with Corbyn and anti-Semitism. People want to support Corbyn because they view him as through an ideological prism, and they ignore the flaws.
Yeah, which are legion. I mean, look, a lot of the Labour policies are absolutely bang on for what the country needs, and they are concentrating not on Brexit, which I think is they ought to out of duty, but they're not concentrating on it because they're going to let the Tories make a mess of it instead. But the social policies are where the action is going to be after Brexit. Well, and it is at hospitals and schools and all the rest of it, and that's going to give them a big opportunity unless the Tories wake up and realise what's going on.
Yeah, I noticed there was some mockery of Corbyn because he was seen on buses talking about buses, but that's one of the big stories. I mean, certainly around
that's
here.
That's where the action is.
It's absolutely insane the way that in the UK we can't. You're basically priced out of using your local transport because it is so insanely expensive now.
Yeah, and that's one of 100 different aspects of life in the UK, which the Tory hierarchy just don't get because they're so busy doing big business and busy doing big policies and foreign policy and Brexit and all the rest of it. They just don't seem to understand what's going on at street level, and that might let in Labour as and when there's an election.
Well, I mean, I know we've moved away from Venezuela here, but it's actually no, but it is actually it's interesting. I noticed Theresa May this week they suggest that she's going to bribe Labour MPs to support Brexit by giving money to local aid. That is terrible. That is horrific. Because if austerity was a real need for economic cuts, then fine. You know, it wasn't done for ideological reasons. But if it was done if it was done for ideological reasons, and now they have the money and they say, "Oh, you can have the money back," that is just that's like Trump with the Dreamers taking it away and then offering it back.
Yep. And if you look at politics as partly as narrative and partly as public relations, that's a pretty poor narrative and a pretty poor public relations they've done this week.
Yeah, terrible.
Yeah. I mean, they're saying, "Oh, of course we're not buying these Labour MPs," and all right, essentially they're not, but they are essentially buying their Brexit policy. Well, they're trying to.
Like they weren't buying Conservative backbenchers with knighthoods and making them, Privy Councillors.
Well, they all do that, Labour and Tories. I don't know. Well, I do know how we got there. We got there because
ideological.
Yes. Briefly back to Venezuela. I was
going to say, what do you think the American position is going to be on it then? Because I was writing about this earlier this week. I was wondering. I thought maybe that Venezuela is going to offer Trump some options, some opportunities.
No, it's the other way round.
Do you think? Okay.
Yeah. The way I read it last week, 2 weeks ago, when this young alternative president announced that, he swore himself in a ceremony in the street, within minutes the White House said, "Right, we recognise him as the president." Now, there is no way in hell that was not worked out beforehand.
Yeah.
The CIA or others will have said to the opposition, "Look, if you're going to do this, let us know when you're going to do it." The White House will have got to hear about it. Even Trump's impetuousness, he didn't just wake up and, "Oh, that fella says he's president. Yeah, I'll support that." Yeah. This was clearly worked out between the opposition, and not just the evil Yankees coming down, but most of the Latin American countries weighed in behind. I noticed that the European Parliament, for what it's worth, weighed in behind this as well yesterday. Then the opposition, very cleverly, have said, "We're not going to come after the generals. We know you've murdered people. We know that you're multimillionaires. We're not even going to come after your money." And I think that's really smart because it gives them less of an incentive to actually make this a civil war to survive. There was a very interesting tweet from I think it might have even been John Bolton, not a tweet but a statement, that Maduro really should look forward to relaxing on a beach for the rest of his life. Yeah. Again, I take that as a hint to Maduro, we won't come after you. And if a Latin American country can offer him somewhere to go, even better, because the lifestyle is the same. It's not quite like someone like Assad in Syria having to spend the rest of his life in Siberia somewhere if he was ever to flee, which is now unlikely. So all that stuff's flying around. So I think it's the Americans that are partly in the driving seat. They have stopped buying most of the oil. Some extra sanctions are coming in. They're clearly pushing. The opposition is pushing, but they're saying, let's not make this a war. And they're trying to push the Chinese out. And of course, the Chinese and the Russians are saying this is interference. The Chinese do this because they will not countenance interference anywhere, because they fear it in their own country, because they realize there's so many minorities in their own country who are against them. The Russians do it because they can stick it to the Americans, and they also need a foothold in Latin America.
I was going to ask, do you think the Russians can exploit it in terms of the Ukraine? And there's a kind of, because I've noticed a few, I mean, I suggested it earlier in the week that maybe it's like an opportunity for Putin to say, well, you know, if you're meddling in your back garden, because I noticed Bolton was talking about this is our sphere of influence or something. It's gone back to the whole
that takes you
Cold
that takes
War.
you all the way back to no, it goes even back further, David. Do you know the Monroe Doctrine?
Yeah,
it goes all the way back to the Monroe Doctrine when the foreigners, other than the Americans, were pushed out of Latin America. Spanish were pushed out of Cuba, etc., etc. And the Monroe Doctrine, that came later. The Monroe Doctrine says no European or foreign powers will be operating in Latin America because that's our backyard. Yeah. Bolton, did you see his notepad?
I've not seen his notepad. Have they got one of these zoomed-in images?
That's yeah. I mean, this is just so see-through. Bolton walks out of a meeting with his notepad facing the way so that photographers can capture it, and on it is written Venezuela, and underneath Venezuela is written 5,000 troops. Oh, please, please.
Yeah, it's straight out of the thick of it. That was the plot of the thick of it.
So, but I don't think Bolton is so stupid as A, not to do it deliberately, but B, if he's done it deliberately, which I think he has, I don't think anybody seriously, including himself, thinks that anybody would buy the 5,000 troops option, because in the unlikely event that they're going to do it, the military options that I've been looking at across the week, minimum 25,000.
Yeah,
minimum. And anyway, I don't think they're going to go there anyway. I think he was tweaking the tail there.
But do you think the Venezuela issue can actually feed back into American domestic policies? Because there was a study by one of these American think tanks in December. I think they said 8 million refugees could be caused by civil war in Venezuela.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, there's already 3 million people have fled already.
Yeah.
And the strain in places like Colombia, Brazil as well, it's really beginning to show. Bolsonaro is already planning putting up fences to stop people getting out. But the death spiral, I don't see a way out of it. I said about there's no alternative industry to oil. The oil price has dropped. One of the ways to try to counter this was when the Bolivar was overvalued, anything grown in Venezuela, it was very hard to sell it abroad. The foreign products were becoming really cheap. So lots of that was flowing into Venezuela. And then he devalued and devalued. But then people just simply started getting into the black market, and the economy just keeps spiraling down and down and down. And one of the only ways to survive is through corruption.
Yeah.
And then people start fleeing.
Well, I noticed wasn't there a Russian plane arrived, and they suggested it was going to be, was it 30 tons of gold?
Quite possibly, except that there's a story doing the rounds today, which has not yet been verified, that Venezuela is actually selling off its gold to the UAE this week to try to get the foreign reserves to keep propping up the regime. Yeah. But even if it's a peaceful exchange of power, or a revolution and the army moves against Maduro after doing a deal with the opposition, which is often what happens, the economy is going to take years and years. And the corruption, decades. I came across a Venezuelan saying this week, for my friends, anything. For my enemies, the law. Meaning that, we're going to make you have to abide by the laws, but Don't worry,
Yeah.
we'll take care of each other outside of it. And getting that out of the system after these years and years of neglect is it's going to be tough. But I just cannot see the situation carrying on like this right through
Well,
the
actually,
year.
that's a good saying, because actually this week Trump had Roger Stone arrested, and it was like, no, you mustn't. You know, they used too much force on him. You know, the law was too strong with Roger Stone. Yet, you know, last year he was saying he wants the people to be arrested and beat them up a
Lock
little
her
bit.
up.
Yeah.
Look, finally, on this one, I just want to again put it out there that the argument that this has been a fantastic experiment in socialism and it's worked and it's only the evil Yankees, I think is wrong. But capitalism that came before Chavez didn't exactly help people, and the place was nowhere near as equitable as it should have been. In this example, I simply think it's poor rulers, not systems, that are most to blame.
So do you think a coup is the most likely, you know, the army taking over?
Yeah, in conjunction with the opposition and the deal's done, that, we'll give you this amount of power. I mean, that's the way it usually works. Right, I hope all this hot air has made you a bit peckish. I don't know about you, David, but when I go to my local curry house, I actually like a bit of that music in the background. Do you?
No. I
love it.
To be honest with you, I have this argument regularly. Indian food is one of the foods I just don't like. I just don't know why. Too spicy, too fruity, too much sultanas. It's not.
Well, you're having the wrong dishes. I mean, I like a good spicy dish, but it's quite possible to find lots of other things, including the vegetable dishes on the side. But I've slightly got off topic. But when I go to my local Thai, they're a lovely lot, lovely family. We always have a good laugh. But they insist on playing whatever is in the top 20, and it just doesn't work. I don't want to be in a restaurant, listen to Radio 1.
No, that makes sense, yeah. I'd much rather have some authentic music rather than the top 20.
Authentic, that's the word I was looking for. Right, because fresh from that hot topic a few weeks ago of what is a sausage roll, now we're on to the bastardisation of the biryani. Marks and Spencer's, as I'm sure you have seen, not that you shop there, but you'll have been in the papers.
Wait a minute. What do you mean? Not that I don't shop there. I go to Marks and Spencer's all the time. Gorgeous food.
Have you seen the prices?
Well, when I used to work in Manchester, there was a Marks and Spencer's on every single corner, and it was the one treat in the day was to get a decent wrap.
Well, you are hitting all the hot buttons.
Oh, am I?
Right. Wrap, you said. Yeah. Yes. Authentic, yes. So Marks and Spencer's is selling a sweet potato biryani. It's a vegan wrap, and it's £2.80 to you, Gov. Now, this is obviously actually not very important. But what is important is that it's triggered this thing as part of modern life of outrage, Twitter storm, which, you know, like I said in the introduction, probably at least 6 people, which is all it takes for the media to pick it up. Which I'd like to come back to that in a moment. So, for example, a London-based Indian restaurant weighed in via Twitter. This is wrong at so many levels. You seriously need to rethink your exotic wrap selection. This is not biryani. You do not appropriate names from a cuisine without even bothering to do any research on that dish. To which my response was, oh God, who cares?
They do it all the time. It's I mean, this is going back to the vegetarian sausage roll, isn't it?
Oh no, that's slightly different because unless you sort of identify, if you self-identify as a meat lover, no, this is a different realm. This is this cultural appropriation argument that who are you to take our cuisine to sell and make a profit out of without without conducting any sort of research about it?
I don't know, because I eat a lot of wraps. It's one of my staple parts of my diet, but every single one of them seems to have some weird mishmash of ingredients, but also cultures. I mean, Mexican 3-bean wraps. I mean, was Mexican 3-bean originally a salad or a soup, or
It's probably nobody in Mexico has ever heard of that. But I don't know, and I don't really care.
Yeah, I agree.
So for me, there's two things going on here. One is the idea of the cultural appropriation, which inside the whole argument there is something, because sometimes people perhaps do ride on the backs, but overall it's just a simple borrowing and a fusion, and the whole fusion cuisine. I mean, people were saying, oh, you don't even spell biryani like that. Well, it's the original word, whether it's either Punjabi or Persian, because there's a whole argument about that. And you can spell it a whole bunch of ways, because like Arab writing, for example, there's different ways of spelling words in English because there are no direct translation. So, but people are getting worked up about how to spell biryani.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said this before, but culture is all about appropriation. I mean, a half of British culture, British life, is taken from all corners of the world. Our alphabet.
No, but hang on. But again, let me. That is the point of those people that get upset by this. The Oxford Dictionary defines cultural appropriation as the unacknowledged or inappropriate adoption of the customs, practices, ideas, etc. of one people or society by members of another and typically more dominant people or society. And of course, where we borrowed things from were places that we dominated.
Yeah, to a certain extent, but we also were invaded, and the Romans brought a lot of stuff. I don't know.
Thank goodness for that. Yes.
Yeah, I just think it's a little bit naive and a little bit of an oversimplification, because a lot of the things you have in your life, you probably can't identify where they've come from, but they have probably been influenced by, West Indian culture or, South American.
Oh God, yeah. Well, luckily, one or two more relaxed restaurateurs whose heritage is from the subcontinent came back and said, I don't care. I really don't care. I mean, somebody was ranting that there's no such thing as a vegetable biryani. So, as part of my in-depth research this morning, I looked up several of my local Indian, which of course are Bangladeshi, restaurants, and every single one of them had vegetable biryani, which may well be catering to the sort of ethnic mix of this country and not of the subcontinent. But again, so what? So anyway, M&S had to put this statement out, which it's just soul-destroying. It makes your heart shrivel up. M&S is famous for its food innovation, and our developers use a fusion of different flavours and ingredients to create an exciting range of products to appeal to customers' tastes. Don't you just hate that sort of language?
Yeah. Stand by what you did and just accept it.
Oh, and exciting. Do you know, I sometimes, well, you probably get them. You get emails from companies like Sainsbury's and Tesco and say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how exciting was your visit to our store today?
Yeah, I just slap everything 5 and just send it back.
Right. Oh, read the Twitter storm. Yeah, I came across something this week that defined it. So often, a Twitter storm is when one person says one thing, another person says how outraged they are, 2 or 3 people agree on Twitter. Somebody in the media notices this, writes it up as a Twitter storm, because I think more than 3 people is a Twitter storm at this point. They then, the following day, get somebody moderately famous to write an entire column article about said Twitter storm, and then by Sunday, Andrew Marr interviews somebody about it. That's a Twitter storm.
Well, you could actually, I mean, this goes into the whole story, which we're not going to go into with, what was it? BuzzFeed getting rid of a lot of journalists this week. I noticed another big website closed this morning. It's this cheap journalism which is sort of destroying the.
Wasn't it BuzzFeed that started the whole listicles?
Probably, yeah. That's what they were famous for.
10 things you didn't know, which I'm very grateful for, because we'll be having 10 things you didn't know about this week's facts.
Well, hang on, wait a minute. Is this my chance to ask you, pick your brains? I was going to do a sound effect, Ask Tim, which I'll insert here.
It's time to ask Tim.
Because I started a Twitter. Well, it didn't really become a Twitter storm, but I've got this problem with a neighbour, and I thought,
look, I don't want to. I mean, your private life is your private life, David.
Yeah. Anyway, I live next door to an undertaker, and he started to park. Do you know the vans they carry bodies around in?
Yeah, we call them hearses, don't we?
Well, they're not the hearse, but it's the kind of van where they go and pick somebody up and take him back to the thing. So every time I go out the front door, I've got this huge wall at the side of this van declaring, funeral services.
Yes.
And I ask people, would you be upset by that every time you take the milk out that you're faced by your own mortality? So where do you stand on it? Would you like to have a funeral director parking his body van outside your front door?
I wouldn't say I would like to. I would defend to the death his right to. As for reminding you of your own mortality every day, gosh, sorry, I've not really thought about this. Yeah, you know what? If you had a choice, you'd choose no, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Right. Well, actually, that brings me to the second part of the question, because when I phrased it, I think I phrased it the wrong way. You see, I don't think you get this in London, because when I was in London, when was it, last February, I noticed it. You don't have this in London. In
dead
the areas.
People?
No. Companies who give vehicles to their employees.
Yes.
Like if you work for DHL, you take your DHL van home at night, or if you work for BT.
Yeah.
So on one side, I've got a load of BT vans. 3 doors down, we've got a huge DHL van which blocks the light from everybody's houses. We've got an undertaker's, we've got an electrician's, we've got FedEx. These companies are using residential areas as cheap parking spaces.
No, their employees at least can take the vehicle home and don't have to use their own vehicles. And of course we have it in London. I mean, there's a black cab on my street. I think there's 2 guys who drive black cabs, and they park their cabs. And
black cabs aren't 30 feet long and about 15 feet high.
And I think there's a fellow who does the I would call it long-range window washing. With those massive things that they use for 3-story buildings or whatever, who parks his van. I'm sorry, this is for me about as big an issue as a biryani wrap.
Well, I was just interested to know whether it was just me. Apparently, it is only just me. Or 30% of people who answered my poll share my opinion. But
at this juncture, shall we?
Carry on.
No. Do tell us your Twitter handle.
Oh, it's David Waywell.
Did it take you long to think of that?
Not very long. No.
Moving on back to geopolitics and things we lost in the mire. Regular listeners will know these are things that, for whatever reason, I think are quite important, but mostly missed. But they tell you the direction of travel of some of the bigger news stories. Denmark has called for new EU sanctions if Russia refuses to release the Ukrainian sailors that it detained in the Kerch Strait in November. Now, if Denmark says this openly, it means they're going to get probably some support from the EU, and there probably are going to be some more EU sanctions. But it also reminds you that the Sea of Azov dispute between Russia and the Ukraine has not gone away, and I suspect will come back, possibly mildly violently, later this year. And then something else that just really caught my attention. The Ukrainian Defence Ministry says that after a meeting with German officials, the German armed forces say they are ready to assist in deterring Russian aggression in the Sea of Azov. Now, the German military has not been known for deterring anything for about 75 years. They don't do deterring anymore. So this was, for me, if it's true, that's quite a thing. If the German Navy is going to get out of its own comfort zone and actually sail near to the Sea of Azov. You might remember the UK sent a Navy ship to Odessa a few weeks ago. It was just a show of support, but signalling matters. This one might attract you, David. The EU is thinking about banning equipment from China's Huawei, that big Chinese company, in the 5G networks, which are coming this year. It might involve an existing cybersecurity law that the EU has passed. They're going to expand it and expand the definition of what critical infrastructure is. And they're going to include 5G networks in critical infrastructure. Now, the trouble is that this Chinese company makes some good stuff and they make it cheap. 5G, is it really going to happen this year?
I'm not exactly up on.
Oh,
I have such an old-fashioned phone. I don't think I've even got 3G.
But you're our resident tech correspondent.
Yeah, not on mobile phones. I'm not.
Well, all right. I reckon 5G is going to be quite a thing. Not just because we can stream this and the other, but the amount the speed of the streaming is going to have a lot of knock-on effects in industry and in commerce. Anyway, looking at communication skills, the celebrity psychic Uri Geller, spoon-bending chappie, yeah? Well, he says he's going to use his telepathic powers to stop Jeremy Corbyn becoming the UK's Prime Minister.
Oh, for God's sake. And you said my story about the neighbour being an undertaker wasn't interesting. I mean, Uri Geller is one of the biggest...
No, I think your story about the Undertaker is interesting. I think your efforts to get a nationwide movement to ban people from being able to drive the vans that they work in to their houses every night and force them onto public transport at a greater cost to them, I think is quite immoral.
Oh, I'm too ill for this. Go.
Right. Last week's podcast this week. It's the mea culpa time. I said Stanley Kubrick directed the film Patton. David was so polite he didn't laugh uproariously at my idiocy, but you did. Well, you did demur.
No, sorry.
Go on.
Well, what threw me was I remembered that it was Francis Ford Coppola who wrote Patton.
He did.
So it kind of had that sort of stuck in the back of my head.
Yeah. No, but you got it right. It wasn't Billy Wilder, but it was Franklin J. Schaffner, who I'm not really familiar with.
Never heard
No,
of him.
but he directed Patton, which is just a fantastic film. There's an opening scene in which Patton appears and he's just completely framed by the American flag behind him, giving a speech, and it's shot from as if you're in the front row of the audience looking straight at him. And he's wearing an army helmet, and he looks just like Mussolini. And of course, the whole of the beginning of the film is this: did he have fascistic tendencies?
George C. Scott actually does look like Mussolini as well. Doesn't it?
Brilliant performance by George C. Scott, and the film won 7 Oscars. And as you said, it was part written by Francis Ford Coppola. Which reminds me, you mentioned when you came down to London last year. Remember we went for coffee in a cafe called Bar Italia. Frith Street in Soho. It's owned by the Pelledri family, who are friends of mine going back 30 years now. I was sat outside Bar Italia in Frith Street once, and I looked to my left, and who was sitting there but Francis Ford Coppola.
Wow!
Didn't recognise me. He didn't recognise me, but I was quite taken by that moment.
Yeah, it's one of those. It wasn't David Bowie I was going in there, and a few other Dave Stewart.
Not when I was there, but I did see that guy from Soft Cell there once, Mark Almond, and hang on, the lead singer of Dexys Midnight Runners.
Yeah, well, Gail Porter was sitting at the next table, wasn't she?
Who's Gail Porter?
She used to be a kind of TV presenter in the 90s, I think.
And you recognised her?
She's very recognisable. She has alopecia.
Did she recognise you? Right, the spam email. Can you tell me if this is a spam email, please? Good morning. It's a good start, yeah? I hope you're well. Nice. I would like to contribute to your blog one of the articles I have written on blockchain-based gun control. I have saved the article on my Google Drive, which you can find here, and then there's the link, which I have not yet clicked on, nor do I intend to. I am sorry, but I did not have any time to find any royalty-free images, so it would be fab if you could add some. I will try to write up a few more articles on my gun collection, as and when I get some free time! I hope your readers enjoy reading my article. It would be great if you could send me a link once you have had a chance to put it up so that I could show it off to my friends. Ha ha! ! Cheers, Tony. Is that a spam email?
I think so, possibly. What you get with this on blogs is a lot of people offering to give you free content, and there's usually a catch in the sense that they probably embed some links back to some other places, or it could just be people looking to start in journalism and not particularly going about it in a good way.
I mean, I don't want to label Tony the purveyor of spam emails, but
you do get a lot of offers like that.
Yeah, but usually... I get some offers saying I'm a PhD student at X university specialising in North Korea, and I'm very interested in, as well as my academic work, writing, would you please and these are genuine and I'm interested in them. Ones like this, I'm sorry, I haven't had time to find a royalty-free image.
No, there's a whole industry in producing kind of cheap content for websites.
Right. Why?
And farming the links.
Yeah, why?
Because if you had a website, okay, you've got a website. Let's say you can go to 100 other websites and embed into those websites a link back to your website. Google think, oh, your website's very popular because look, everybody's linking to it, and it raises the profile of your website. That makes it more valuable.
But hang on, sorry, I'm being a bit slow. I have no problem with the profile of our website being raised. What's in it for Tony?
No. Well, if he's got a website, if there's a company somewhere who've got a website and they're trying to get backlinks to their website, that website is going to be raise its profile. They'll have a load of adverts for different kinds of drugs and sex and everything, and Google will send more people to it. More people, more advertising revenue. This is the problem with journalism at the moment. The culture of clicking on stories. It's the people are making money through the advertising, but they want to get people to visit, so they end up producing clickbait. That's what
I've got a
is.
friend who writes for Bloomberg sometimes, and a couple of years ago, I don't know if this is still the case, she was paid by how many clicks she got.
Yeah,
and that was a policy.
Horrible.
So that's hardly conducive to journalism doing a story which might not be that attractive, but actually really needs doing for whatever reason.
No, no, exactly. That's what it does. It just encourages everybody to make lists, everybody to make really kind of salacious headlines, and
brilliant timing. Because
speaking of lists,
yes, speaking of lists and brilliant timing, are you holding onto your seat?
I always do.
Because it's time to get up.
It's not Das Boot, is it?
No, that's your alarm clock.
I'm just going to say Das Boot every week.
It's time for this week's facts, which are on
wraps, curry.
I tried to get enough facts about biryani, and just no. Oh, hang on. No, that's the fire alarm. Not the fire alarm. It's a fire alarm I found on YouTube.
That,
no, it's on Venezuela because as I say every week, I'm trying to cling on to the last vestiges of the geopolitical aspect of the podcast, and actually they are more interesting than biryani. Are you ready?
Yeah, go on.
In 1497, on his third voyage to the Americas, Christopher Columbus sailed to what is now Venezuela and declared he had found heaven on earth, and he nicknamed the region of the Orinoco Delta the Land of Grace. And to this day, Venezuela's nickname is the Land of Grace. The territory was colonized by Spain 1522, but gained independence 1821 under Simón Bolívar. And of course that's why it's known as the Bolivarian Revolution, when Chavez took it over, and it's also why the currency is called the Bolivar. Then it was just part of Gran Colombia. Gran Colombia eventually split up into 3 different countries. Less interestingly, Venezuela has provided more Miss World winners than any other country.
Hang on, why is that less interesting? That's more interesting.
Oh, okay, that's the way you want to take it. I'll carry on. It's got the second highest number of gun-related deaths in the world.
Wow.
59.13 per 100,000 residents a year. Honduras is the most. And the capital, Caracas, the worst gun-related deaths of any major city. Only 4 countries have got higher road death stats. Eritrea, Dominican Republic, Libya and Thailand. This is interesting. There's an everlasting lightning storm. It's formed over the mouth of the Catatumbo River, and cold mountain air collides with the heat of a lake there, and it's the most likely place on Earth you can see lightning. And there are nights where you can see more than 100,000 lightning strikes in one night. I wouldn't mind seeing that at all for about half an hour. And a strange Christmas tradition. I haven't checked this one, but in Caracas it is customary to travel to early morning church services during the festival period on roller skates. Roads are even cleared to provide Christmas worshippers with a safe passage to skate to church. That's what it's. Yeah.
I think I might have to check that one up.
Well, yeah, last week's podcast this week. Venezuela has had a national professional baseball league since 1945, and today baseball is the nation's most popular sport. That's it, David.
Oh, sorry. I think we should have gone with a curry myself. Curry facts.
I'm trying to remember some of them. Hold on. Yeah, you can spell it a number of different ways. There are many different types of it, and that we should all be, biryani. We should all be more relaxed about the whole thing. Would you like to say goodbye, David?
Goodbye.
Goodbye. I shall leave you with El Tigrito by a well-known Venezuelan, I think, Arana Zoltan. Either way, this is some very nice Venezuelan music.
Compañero, présteme su carabina, a ver si mato un tigrito que me ha dejado en la ruina. Este atrevido bichito se ha comido en 4 días una vaca y un becerro y una yegua con su cría. Si me sale por aquí, me disparo desde ahí. Si me sale por allá, me disparo desde acá. Si me sale por aquí, me disparo desde ahí. Si me sale por allá, me disparo desde acá.
The end is in sight.
A colourful phrase used by a charismatic figure.
This is the Trump shutdown.
Thank you, God bless you, and God bless the nations of the world.